Hello, doom scrollers. Eric from Dead Tech here, and today I am in a lovely residence inn at the Marriott in Bismarck, North Dakota, which is admittedly a strange place to be.
We run a pretty tight ship here.
So my wife and I, Amanda, have been traveling for the last couple of months. Yeah, it's been a while since you've heard from me, so been busy. Been on the road, traveling to the Dakotas and Idaho, kind of exploring the non-coastal west of the U.S., where we're fortunate to be able to do that because it hasn't been because it hasn't been hit so hard by the pandemic, sparse population. So kind of if you unfocus your eyes a little bit and spend a lot of time outside, hiking, doing outdoor things, it's almost like life is normal. And yeah, it's been great. So between doing that travel and inadvertently starting a series on my blog where I'm writing a lot more again for freelancers, if you want to see that, link below in the description. It's a series for software freelancers about how to kind of become more like business owners, reap a profit, build equity in your business. So I've been doing that, and it has led to a gap in video content. In case you're wondering, I'm not stopping this or anything, it's just circumstances. So yeah, and along those lines, let's get to some reader questions today. One quick housekeeping note: the audio for this may not be real good. As you can see here, I just have my mic that I would normally talk into for these audio recordings. The table in this hotel is such that I can't put my boom on it. Anyway, I am just recording audio through my phone. If that goes terribly, I'm just going to publish this anyway and try to do better next time because, you know, I'm not all that good at this stuff, but hey, I'm doing my best. So hopefully it's not noticeable, but now it probably will be because I just pointed that out. Anyway, on to the reader questions. All right, the first question. Hi, Eric. Happy New Year. As you can see, I'm still not incredibly timely with these things, but to my credit, we are talking about New Year going into 2020, back when we all thought this might actually be a happy year. So Happy New Year. First up, thanks for your book, Developer Hegemony. It is one of the few books that I find so relevant chapter to chapter and reading persistently to gain the insights you have shared. Totally relate to it, having worked in the industry for long and planning to pursue further studies on the side. Though I have to say that deciding on an efficiencer firm, being on an H-1B visa is a big challenge. Yeah, we got our cats with us. It's a little bit interesting to record these videos, not in my home office, but hey, bear with me. Anyway, I have to say that deciding on an efficiencer firm being on an H-1B visa is a big challenge. Interested to know your views if you have already shared it via blog or a write-up somewhere. Oh, that's a question. Great to be connected with you. This must have come through LinkedIn. Anyway, first of all, thanks for the kind words. Thanks for buying the book. I appreciate all that. And then let's talk about becoming an efficiencer on an H-1B visa. So if you're not familiar with my book, link to that in the description too, but an efficiencer, briefly speaking, is a term that I use for somebody who I think of as an automation professional. And one of the things I talk about in my book is that instead of just kind of slinging code as a vector for labor, that we ought to own more of the business around this automation that we do. And I call that person an efficiencer. It's a professional automator sort of focused in a problem domain. And what he's talking about with an efficiencer firm, that is the idea that I have that salaried employment isn't the greatest of deal for software engineers. So I've advocated that they should, you know, when it makes sense for you, leave, kind of perform an exodus from salaried employment, where you have a bunch of layers of management pressing down on your salary because managers make more than individual contributors. So you get out of that and you kind of are more inclined to freelance and work with companies as a contractor. This is the idea that once you do that, instead of kind of accepting like a manager or a project manager or what have you, think of yourself banding together with some engineers the way that like lawyers do as partnerships. And the lawyers don't like go hire a lawyer manager to be their boss. They band together as partners that run the business and kind of delegate things to subordinates. So that is the idea, in short, of the efficiencer firm. Yeah, so that's the idea of an efficiencer firm. The efficiencer firm is people who own more of the business stuff around app dev and who band together as the bosses of this firm and contract out app dev. So basically what he's asking is, if I'm on an H-1B visa, how would I go about doing this? And the challenge there is going to be the autonomy. So I'm not an expert in H-1B visas, but I've worked with people who are on them. And I've also, as a management consultant, advised IT directors and people who are staffing on how to work with H-1B visa programs. The idea here basically is that if you are not a US citizen, you can come here on this indefinite visa to work as long as a company sponsors you. So as an H-1B candidate or as an H-1B visa holder, you come to the US and your employer is kind of your lifeline to being in the US. Without that employer, you would have to go back to the country where you're a citizen, presumably. So how do you kind of navigate this relative employer independence as an H-1B visa holder? And that's tough. I do know somebody that's a colleague and a friend who successfully went into business for himself, created an entity, and wound up sponsoring himself. So I know that you can do that. You can go and create a LLC or whatever it is and navigate sponsoring yourself with that business. That said, he had to spend a year or two doing it, and a lawyer was involved. Like, it wasn't easy. So it's a challenging process. So what I would recommend is, if you want to be an H-1B visa sponsored efficiencer in the US, the first thing I would do is talk to some people and or start your own firm and start moonlighting. So keep your sponsorship, keep your job, and set up business precedents. You maybe start an LLC and you start doing some work and you recruit partners and you basically lay the groundwork for what's going to be your efficiencer firm, but while you've still got that sponsorship and full-time job. Once you've got some traction there, I think it should be easier to negotiate the H-1B visa sponsorship process if you have a work history and you can demonstrate that, like, you're an actual firm and you're not just creating a business for $50 a year or whatever to incorporate to, like, run some game on the H-1B visa system.
What really matters is my title. I think I'll make myself vice president. No, wait, junior vice president.
So if you establish that, ideally with some partners, maybe those partners are citizens, once you're doing work under that umbrella, when you get enough work and you get the sponsorship, then you can flip over and have your new firm be sponsoring you. So that's the route that I would pursue if I were you. All right, next up, what do I think of legacy code? So the reader question is, I've spent most of my career working on web-based legacy enterprise applications, both in-house and on an indirect consulting basis. I work for a company who occasionally gets hired to help an outside firm on some possibly software-related problem whose help is turned over to me. The problem tends to involve software, but the solution doesn't always involve me writing code. Anyway, you've done consulting and coding for several years. I was curious what your experience and thoughts about working legacy applications are. My primary takeaway has been you never know what you're getting, regardless of what people say or what documentation they provide, until you look under the hood, open the walls, or some other metaphor. Note, all surprises have been scary. Not all surprises have been scary, but some have. What has your experience been working with legacy software, and what are your thoughts about working with legacy software? So I've worked a lot with legacy software. Before running Hit Subscribe full-time, that kind of coincided with my IT management consulting practice, and a lot of that was application portfolio assessments. So usually enterprises would call me in, and somebody that I'd be engaged with, a VP or director, sometimes a board of directors, program CIO, anyway, would call me in to size up via a specialized form of static analysis that I would do, size up a code base or code bases and help them make a decision about what to do with it, scrap it, evolve it, etc. And so almost invariably, I think you could easily call these applications legacy code. Sometimes I'd be called in to look at a new initiative to see how it was going, but usually legacy code. And I can agree with the you never know what you're getting. Full stop on the documentation and people's anecdotes don't speak to the situation. Absolutely true. You're never going to get a full picture until you dive in, and I would personally argue you're never going to get a full picture by just kind of manual inspection, but I would always go in and robo-analyze these code bases and gather data. Looked at dozens of code bases in that consulting practice and robo-analyzed hundreds of them in research that I was doing for the consulting practice, so I've seen a lot of legacy code. What I think of it, so I guess from kind of a funny perspective, I'll say that in every one of those situations, I would always see something that challenged my poker face while I was looking at or analyzing the code and having it explained to me. So there would always be something, some crazy code generation scheme or some 40,000 line SQL statement or something that I'd never seen before. And just really, I'd be sitting there and thinking, wow, yeah, that's, keeping that poker face like, hey, that's unusual. I haven't seen that before. So there's always something like that would just kind of like defy reasoning. But I'm going to say something else kind of in counter to that point. So yeah, you would always see something like this, but you might think that going in and providing these assessments, data-based, gathering data, kind of ranking code bases in certain criteria, that I'd become really judgmental. But actually kind of the opposite happened. Programmers are intelligent people, and intelligent people can make bad or weird decisions, but not without a lot of strained context, meaning I'm going in and I'm providing an antiseptic assessment without any context. So I don't know what kind of delivery pressure they were facing. I don't know how incomplete the information they had was, if they were dealing with bad sets of requirements. And what I would find over time is people don't really make bad decisions in the way you think of when you look at legacy code and judge them. They're making decisions almost invariably that are understandable in the moment and kind of have a trickle effect rolling downhill as delivery pressure mounts and things happen. So I would see these things and maybe laugh a little bit about them, but more laughing in empathy and understanding that, hey, you were in a rough spot here and this is understandable. So legacy code kind of, see a lot of interesting things. In some ways, it actually made me less judgmental working with all this legacy code, and I personally kind of like it. There's a weird, like, disinfectant kind of feeling to
Must hold still.
cleaning up a legacy code base, getting it under test, organizing it, helping it evolve and get situated in a better direction. And to any of you watching, I would suggest making peace with legacy code, because like greenfield development is pretty rare, and half the time you do it, the thing you're writing will never actually be used by anyone because you run out of funding or just nobody needs it or whatever. So your career is going to be in legacy code of some fashion or another. So yeah, that's what I think of it. It's sort of unavoidable, always provides interesting things, but also very understandable. Mostly the people who were contributing to it aren't idiots. They're making surprisingly rational decisions in good faith, given what's going on around them in the moment. All right, question 3. This must have been in a Slack. I have a reader question for Eric's blog. Not sure how to propose it, so I'll do it here. I have a troubled relationship with fake internet, quote, social networks, Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. My real social network are the people I can meet with in a cafe in Berlin when I struggle with something and need direct communication with a human near me to help sort it out. Fair enough. What big tech companies propose is instead a parody of a social network whose design constraint is about optimizing user engagement metrics to sell ads, the end result being people wasting time on the internet and nobody really listening to each other. Can't argue with any of that. At the same time, I produce content that I care about and I want it to reach the people who need it. And it's a fact of the internet life that Twitter and CIE are currently an important channel to reach them. I'm not sure what CIE is, but I do know what Twitter is. So the pragmatic part of me wants to go back to Twitter and CIE, but then I overdo it and stay there longer than I would like and become angrier and more stressed than I planned. I'm not laughing because that's silly. I'm laughing because it's totally understandable. I have yet to find a balance that works for me. How do I sort this out? That's a great question. For me, it took a long time, a lot of experience over the years. So just for the sake of understanding, I have had a blog for 10 years that has waxed and waned, but probably more waxed in terms of popularity. And I produce content and have produced content in a lot of channels, lots of content. I'm very talkative and prolific with my words. A lot of you might argue that I go on for too long. So lots of content coming out and lots of experience with social media networks. doing my own marketing for Dead Tech and my consulting, and now I literally am the CEO of a content marketing company. So not only am I very familiar with producing lots of content, but I'm extremely busy. I have a lot more input coming into me than I probably have time to deal with, and I understand just how awful the internet can be.
At Chance the Rapper, more like Chance the worthless, spineless, soulless, purposeless, virtueless sellout. Nice Doritos commercial, you piece of
in terms of the feedback you get and the things that people say. I mean, as much as I can as a white dude, like I can't imagine some of you watching, like women, there are people that get it a lot worse than me, so I'm not trying to say that I have it the worst, but in my own experience, it's still, pretty awful at times. So how do you deal with it? I'll offer a few strategies, and these are ones that I've adopted. I have a post that I retweet or whatever, reshare from time to time called Stop Arguing with Software Developers on the Internet, something like that. Anyway, links below. And in that, I basically say that instead of getting into arguments on Twitter or any of these places when people take issue with you or disagree, if you notice it and you feel like paying attention, don't respond in that medium. Gather your thoughts, write a blog post, produce a piece of content where you take that, you actually give it time to do some thinking about it, and then you produce it in a channel where not only do you control the message and medium, but it'll be useful to you. Like if somebody tweets something at you and then you start arguing with them, I mean, I'm pretty terrible at Twitter, but what I do know is you don't get a lot of visibility on that. So it's just going to be you and some troll going back and forth. That's pretty useless. You might find that you have typed out hundreds or even thousands of words arguing with that person when you could have typed out a 1,200 word blog post, published it on your blog, and gotten some traction with it. So full stop, I would say make it a commitment device or make it something that you take pride in. Like, hey, I don't argue with people on the internet. At best, maybe you could write a post like, I don't argue with people on the internet, and then you just post a link to that, and that's all you really need to say. So don't just resolve not to do it. Make it like a commitment device. Make it a public platform. Like, sorry, I'm not going to argue in the comments. That's a useless thing for me to do with my time. So that's one thing that I've done. Another thing that I've done over the course of time is, and this will come with being busy and maybe getting a lot more inbound communication than you have time to answer, is you can just set policies, time box what you will respond to, and just, resolve not to respond to a lot of things. Like on Dead Tech and in the comments on YouTube, like channels where people are really kind of personally engaging with me, I honestly do my best to respond to things. But if I have a blog post that goes viral, I'll just kind of punt on being able to respond to everybody's comments if there's enough. And if it's on like Reddit or something, I don't even read that. So, limit the scope of how you'll engage and define, I guess, in advance the contexts in which you will engage, and that'll be pretty helpful. You could do like me, and for the most part, I have made social media pretty much a broadcast-only medium in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I'll engage with people on Twitter, but my Twitter timeline is confusing and overwhelming to me a lot. And so if I kind of see that somebody's like said something nice to me, I'll respond. I do make some attempt to engage, but mostly I've just kind of resolved that Twitter is mainly a broadcast medium. So that's another thing you can do, is just kind of take a mercenary view of these social media, which is, this is how I amplify the content I'm creating, and to the best of my ability, maybe I'll engage with people if they have nice things to say. Otherwise, I'm not going to argue, and I'll just ignore people if they, say stuff that's critical or whatever. So defining rules like that is great. And then honestly, muting it can help a lot too. Like Facebook in the time of coronavirus is, I would argue, the worst place in the world. And so I've done a few things. Like I got this plugin called Feed Eradicator. I have to manage a few business accounts, and I'm in a few Facebook groups that I want to see. But my feed became so unpleasant with people screaming at each other that I literally installed a Chrome plugin that does nothing but just completely block your feed. Like I don't have a Facebook feed anymore. There are things like that you can do. So like rely on technology and do certain things that literally hide all the crap from you. So those are good strategies. I think the important thing is that you want to find ways to limit your exposure to things that suck, and you want to spend as much of your time as possible creating content and sharing that content and engaging with people who are kind of in good faith engaging in discussion with you. And then not only don't spend time doing the rest of it, but like try not to even see it, because it's just not, you don't need that in your life. Nobody has time for that. So yeah, that's my strategy when it comes to social media. All right, question 4, last up. Hi, this is, I'll just stick with my policy of not saying people's names. We'll give a blur on that. This is someone from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I think your blog is great. Thank you. My question is, do you think some kind of developer jobs make it easier to jump into consulting or freelancing? For example, front-end developers might find it easier to make or improve websites or give advice on improving them, which is something that clients can actually see and understand. Back-enders, even if they understand why the company pays their salary, would have a harder time explaining what it is they do to a non-technical person. It could be a personal bias, but I also think that many front-enders are better at marketing. What do you think? Background, I've been thinking of going back into a remote full-time programming job. Where I live, a remote programmer can make way more than a bank manager, thanks to good reputation for technical talent, business hours overlapping with the US, and a devalued peso. But eventually I would like to have my own clients. Thanks and regards. Okay, that's an interesting question. So do some kind of developer jobs make it easier to go into freelancing? To that question itself, I would probably answer I don't think so. Some of the concerns in here are interesting and nuanced, like is it easier for a front-end developer to explain what they're doing to somebody that's not technical? On the surface, probably. So if you're going to limit your potential client base, you're going to pick a niche where you're targeting somebody that is not technical, or maybe it's like e-commerce or whatever you're choosing to do. There's a world where picking that particular job, say front-end web developer, might make it easier for you to sell web development services to non-techies. That's true. But I don't think that makes it easier to freelance necessarily. I kind of want to say something here, which is that employment tends to condition us to I'll post a link to something below. It's an interesting read that Paul Graham talks about hacking bad tests, but the way that we apply for jobs, so, developer jobs, tends to consist of hacking bad tests.
She's almost in. I could launch a cyber nuke, but it'll completely fry his system.
Like there's an interview process that everybody kind of agrees isn't very good or representative, even more so when you're talking about like Silicon Valley FANG type companies, which is you construct this bad system to evaluate and you make people jump through that hoop and they get really good at hacking that bad system. So getting jobs in the corporate world, and especially in tech, can become more of a matter of playing this game that's divorced from actually performing the job than it is proving you can do the job. And so that world is weird when it comes to the business or freelance world, because once you get out of that world, like if I'm hiring freelancers or if I'm hiring a company to do something, I don't devise like weird games for them to play. I just care if they can do the job. So you get used to like hacking bad tests and stuffing resumes and doing all this stuff and kind of like reverse engineering, like, well, okay, if I want a job at Facebook, I'll go learn whatever technologies they like to use, and then I'll go read sites where I can figure out the questions they ask on at interviews, so I can study up on those questions and blah. So you start to like work your way backwards and say, well, my eventual goal is to work at Facebook, so what sort of random things do I need to do to like run that maze? That doesn't apply to jumping to freelancing because there's just not games like that. When it comes to freelancing, to finding business clients, the way that you do that is by offering a service that they value and delivering outcomes that they care about. And there's no like series of tricks to doing that. You just have to legitimately offer something that helps them at a price that's reasonable and affordable for what they're willing to pay. So the reason I'm mentioning all of that is because whatever work you're doing, if it's valued in the corporate world, in a job context, somebody is going to value it in some capacity or another if you're a freelancer. So front-end development, back-end development, you could legitimately say that it's better to get a certain kind of job doing software engineering, depending on the niche you wanted to serve as a freelancer. So yeah, if you were going to help like people set up and customize Shopify stores, then it's probably better to have a front-end web development job than to, write embedded firmware in C. But if you were going to go freelance and help, companies do R&D on applications for like IoT, then you're probably better off as that embedded C developer. So I guess my answer is no, probably not in terms of whether certain kind of developer jobs make it easier to become a freelancer or to go independent or have a business. But depending on the niche you want to serve and the kind of work you want to do, then yes. So I would be thinking less in terms of my ultimate goal is not to have a salaried employer, but start to look at like, okay, if I were going to be a freelancer, what sort of clients would I want? Who would I want to serve? What would I want to be doing? And then once you have that picture in your mind, you can look at getting a job where you're doing a lot of those same kind of tasks or working with those same techs. So that's kind of how I would approach it rather than just approach freelancing as an end in and of itself. Like think of who you're going to serve and what their needs are. Yeah, that'll do it. I'm going to go into my outro here, but hopefully the audio is all right and, all this worked out. It's good to get back at doing this. I will try to do this a little bit more regularly, but that is not a promise. It's just an aspiration. So nice to see you all again. Thank you for watching that reader question roundup. I do appreciate you tuning into these videos. If you would like to ask a reader question, you can do so at deadtech.com/ask. I will also have a link to that down in the description so you can go there right from this page. If you like this video, it'd be great if you could give me a like. It's not just fluff, it actually does help the channel. And if you liked it enough that you want to subscribe, I encourage you to do so. If you're going to do that, maybe click the bell down below because that will give you an email each time a new video is posted to the channel. And I'll say what I have always said, which is that if you don't like, feel free to give it a thumbs down. I am looking for feedback in whatever form it comes, whether it's comments, likes, dislikes, however you want to engage is of course your business. So with that, I will say thanks again for watching and I will catch you next time.